Hi, folks. Okay, I just want to do this quick video here based on a video that came across my feed from Paulogia, who is a pretty well-known internet atheist and skeptic. I believe he claims that he was a former Christian who is interviewing a professor, Dr. Hugo Mendez, who is a professor from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which also happens to be the same university as the infamous professor, Dr. Bart Ehrman. They're colleagues in the same department. I believe it's religious studies or biblical studies. I apologize, I don't know exactly which one. In this video, the discussion is broadly on the gospel attribution of John being traditionally attributed to an author named John, and why scholars believe that attribution is wrong. So I'm going to go into this a little bit and just have a few quick things that I want to discuss about this.
You don't have to know who Huff is, but that's
beautiful, gentle innocence that I retain.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's a lot of consensus that an individual named Johannes, John, wrote the Gospel of John. But the question is that the disciple John? The early church writings ascribe an individual named John the Elder. Is that the same person?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so to start here, let me lay this out at the beginning because this is really important. In this video, I'm not going to take a position on whether or not the gospel that's attributed to John was written by John the Apostle or John the Elder or any John. I'm not taking that position now. I'm doing some work on this. Others have done work. You're free to look elsewhere. That's not the purpose of this video whatsoever. I have a bias. I have a lean toward that, and I'm open about that. Leaning toward the tradition, but that's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is to point out the methodology used by the so-called Religious Studies Academy to discredit that position. And that's what I'm going to be talking about here. So let's continue.
We do not. Yeah, no. So I watched that Wes Huff recent interview, over this question, and that's not where scholarship stands. Okay.
So, this position that an Apostle John or John the Elder is the traditional, is the appropriate author of the gospel that's been attributed to John is just poo-pooed and discredited, scoffed at, it's laughed at. And again, that's fine. That is totally fine. I don't have a problem with that if there's an evidentiary reason why such a position is foolish. Okay, but what we have so far is a gospel that has been, since the earliest manuscripts, always come with the attribution of the gospel according to John. That's on the most earliest of manuscripts that are intact. Every one of them has the gospel according to John. There are no manuscripts that have the gospel according to Jimmy or anything else. And there's early tradition that attributes the gospel to John. So that's not disputed. Let's go on.
So we know that the gospel has the title John affixed to it from a very early point. With the dating of ancient manuscripts, there's a lot of questions about when our earliest text of John is and when we should be able to date it. But suffice it to say, it is a very early tradition that this text was called John, but we really do not know who this author is. The text itself never identifies its author. It is an anonymous text.
Okay, let's just quickly touch on this. So again, the professor concedes, as he must, that the earliest attributions attribute the gospel to John. The earliest traditions do the same. The author does not identify within the text that their name is John. And for this reason, the text is considered anonymous. And I don't want to argue that. I think that's if that's what's meant by anonymous, that within the text, it doesn't say, I am John, the disciple of Jesus. I am writing this gospel. Yes, it's anonymous. It does not otherwise state the name of the author within the text. That's all true. So let's go on.
And in the case of this particular tradition, there are reasons for doubting, in particular, that, for instance, a figure named John actually wrote this gospel.
And then you have...
Okay, so what we're getting to at this point is that despite these bits of evidence that we have, again, evidence from antiquity, evidence that otherwise, in other contexts, is at least prima facie evidence of the point that's being attempted to be proven, that this gospel was from the earliest times we have attributed to a person named John, and that the earliest traditions attributed the gospel to a disciple of Jesus named John, whether it was the Apostle John or another disciple eyewitness. There's some debate on that. We can cover that in another conversation. So we have that. And yet the position here is that, well, we in the academy don't really know who wrote this. Okay, let's continue.
The disciple whom Jesus loved, continually mentioned throughout the Gospels. And so that's clearly the source information of the main eyewitness of where this material is coming from is this particular disciple.
Yeah, so the gospel wants you to think that it comes from a disciple whom Jesus loved. It sets out this character. He's supposed to be the most intimate disciple of Jesus's, his closest follower, his most faithful follower. He's there with him at the crucifixion. He's the first person in the empty tomb. The reality for us as scholars is that we're not sure that he existed. And if he did exist, we're not sure he has the characteristics that the Gospel of John attributes to him. So on the what?
All right, folks. I want to be super clear because this is really important. I am not here to argue that the gospel that's been traditionally attributed to John was actually written by John the Apostle or John the Elder or any other John. I will do that in another video. I'll bring the evidence that I have. I want to be transparent about my bias. My bias is based on the evidentiary record, by the way, but I want to be transparent about that. But that is not the point of this video. What I want to focus on here is the argument from the scholar that is challenging this. And what the scholar here is saying is that this character, right? That's the word he used. We don't have any way of knowing whether this person ever existed. The gospel wants us to believe that this is the disciple whom Jesus loved. It wants us to believe that, but we don't know if it is that. So again, that position is otherwise fine, but we have to have some real tangible evidence for why we shouldn't believe what the text says, especially a text from antiquity. We have to have some other reason than a gut feeling or a hunch, even if that hunch is consensus, as to why we shouldn't believe that this text is written by an eyewitness who claims to be the disciple whom Jesus loves. Let me just play a little bit more, and I think we'll sort of wrap up on this here.
On one hand, there are scholars, and many of them are conservative scholars. Some of them are centrist scholars who believe that there really is a disciple whom Jesus loved, and they would identify that disciple with perhaps John the Apostle, son of Zebedee. They might identify him with other figures like Lazarus, etc., but they believe he existed. There's really a large mainstream of scholars that would think that this disciple might have existed in the past, but that he's being used in the gospel in different sorts of ways. He's, for instance, being given idealized attributes. His life is perhaps being exaggerated or worked over. He's being leveraged in particular to give the gospel eyewitness authority in ways that he probably wouldn't ultimately be really the reason to, kind of cite this for.
Guys, it's so hard for me to respond to these kinds of arguments because they're not grounded in evidence. They're not grounded in any actual evidence. And in fact, what they do is disregard the evidence that we actually have. So in this context, the professor concedes the early attributions, the gospel according to John, from the earliest manuscripts that have been found intact. The professor concedes that the earliest traditions attribute this gospel to a John who was an eyewitness, at the very least, one of two Johns, the apostle, or potentially another character in history called John the Elder. It's not clear. It's another conversation whether those are the same people, different people. But the earliest tradition attributes this gospel to John, an eyewitness disciple of Jesus. So we have those two bits of evidence. And then we have this intrinsic evidence from within the text itself that refers to the author as the disciple whom Jesus loved. And this person gives testimony of a number of events that only an eyewitness could have seen. So we have all of that. And again, it's perfectly fine for a scholar to say, we don't credit that. But if the reason for not crediting it is whims, flimsy opinions, and not otherwise contradictory evidence, other manuscripts, other historical findings, other archaeological evidence, and is instead just 2,000 years later, some people sitting around the room and saying, we don't really believe this is attributed to this person named John. Yes, I know that's the earliest attributions. Yes, I know that the tradition says so. Yes, I know this person claims to be an eyewitness. Yes, I know the early church took this gospel as authoritative, but we don't believe that this character, John, ever really existed. If that's the position they're going to take, it needs to be defended by real and tangible evidence. And again, you can watch, I'm not going to play the rest of this video. You can watch this video for yourself. I'll link the video in the description. You can follow this author. I just want to make a quick video here pointing out the incredibly flawed methodology that's used by religious scholars, and then the shield that they hide behind, which is this is consensus. This is the mainstream consensus. And that's the argument. That is the evidence that we are given for why we should believe it. Hey, you guys can't understand all this. We've done the work. We've done the work behind the scenes, and we've all concluded that we don't think this person really existed. Take our word for it because we're scholars in this area and you're not. And we all agree. So the fact that we all agree, that should make you all believe that all this tradition is wrong. This channel won't do that. That's not how we're going to operate here. That's not how any serious scholarship or any serious, evidentiary burden should be met. I bring this video so that you can all look for yourselves and see how this is done and why you should start having some doubt about whether or not the things that we're being told are consensus have been subjected to rigorous enough scrutiny for us to be able to just blindly accept that consensus. And so I'm going to stop here. Again, this was, I didn't even intend to make this video, but I just felt the need to point this out. Feel free to comment on it. Feel free if you think that there's something here that I'm saying is wrong. Again, what I'm trying to do here is really hold this scholarly group accountable, and that's all I'm doing here. And I'll follow this up with some other videos later on. Thanks.